why you need to buy Geno Smith. That and more this week on The Couch. Daniel Harms, welcome to The Couch. Why do we need to buy Geno Smith?
First of all, thank you for having me on. I love being here and talking football with you. But the biggest reason you need to buy Geno Smith is because he was the QB6 last year overall, and they just improved their offense. Geno Smith made legitimate big-time throws in the NFL. Like there's a couple of throws against the Detroit Lions. Yes, I know it's their defense, but when you think about big-time throws, corners are in the face of the receiver. It's near the sideline, and the receiver has to make like a spectacular catch, but it's in the place where only he can catch it. Those are throws that Geno Smith was making last year. They improved their offense. They added Jackson Smith and Jigba. They drafted Zach Charbonnet. Their offensive line got better. 2 rookies at tackle last year now have a year under them. That's the biggest thing for me, is that we're talking, dynasty. 2 to 3 years out for me is what I'm looking for, especially for guys that are going to be valued where they are. And Geno Smith right now is the QB, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. It's past 10, right. Like 10, 11, 12. It's closer to 16, I think. So that's what I want. That's what I'm looking for. People that, as a QB2 option, he's a perfect guy to put in your lineup, kind of set it and forget it, especially in those super flex leagues. But to have as a quarterback option who can possibly do multiple number 1 QB finishes in terms of top 10 finishes for you for multiple seasons. So Geno Smith is a guy I've been looking to get anytime I can. He's super cheap right now, and people don't want to believe that he was as good as he was last year. And that's something that I'm willing to bet on, considering what they did with the contract, the offense around him. They're really giving him the keys to this offense, and they didn't do that with Russell Wilson. So that kind of tells you how they feel about him, in my opinion.
Yeah, the last time we hung out, Daniel, in Harm's Way 19, by the way, folks out there, and welcome, Daniel, on behalf of everybody, to the Football Guy staff.
Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you as part of, you're elevating the group. And Geno Smith elevated that pass offense, which nobody saw coming last year, that Geno Smith was going to be a net improvement from Russell Wilson. But even on draft night, when we were hanging out, Daniel, well, they're going to take Anthony Richardson, right? Or maybe even Will Levis with their second pick. They don't do either of those things. They get a running mate for Tariq Woolen and Devin Witherspoon, and then they get Jackson Smith and Jigba. And isn't this one of those situations like after a breakup and you see that the ex is actually doing well and you're still stuck, right? Russell Wilson and Sean Payton, they're going run heavy, right? They're taking stuff off. Russ isn't cooking. Russ is just serving, just handing off. Meanwhile, Geno Smith gets Jackson Smith and Jigba. So do you see this as a situation, Daniel? Because I'm fascinated. At this time in the fantasy football calendar, I'm looking more at an offense eyes point of view. And it seems to me like what we are potentially in for here. And I've also, something I've been stuck on lately too, because I love focusing on offenses that are new offenses, like Todd Monken in Baltimore, something like that. But I wonder if we need to spend more time on offenses that are in the second year, right? Offenses that now everybody is comfortable, fluent in the offense and ready to take in that next level. But you add in Jackson Smith and Jigba. You mentioned these tackles, and I think it went way under the radar last year that with their first and third round pick, they get Charles Cross and Abraham Lucas, who are, I mean, how many times has that even happened before where a team gets their 2 starting tackles in this draft as a rookie, they start and they play well? That's the thing too, because oftentimes these the can't miss offensive tackles, some of these guys that are coming on now, right, like Andrew Thomas, well, they weren't that guy in their rookie year the way Charles Cross was. And it was kind of funny because Charles Cross may be better at pass blocking than run blocking, which seemed maybe that was that hint that no, it wasn't just Russell Wilson not being allowed to cook. Maybe Russell Wilson was the problem. So is this an offense, Daniel, where you mentioned Zach Charbonnet? Like, it doesn't really even matter where we invest. Kenneth Walker, DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, who's getting a little bit of that age discount, Smith and Jigba even, because maybe Shane Waldron, he knows a thing or two about 3 wide sets and combining that with a running game that really keeps a defense off. Is this going to take that leap where basically we're going to have a ton of overachievers?
I don't know if we'll have like a ton of overachievers. I know that last year Geno Smith was the overachiever. No one really expected him to finish as high as he did and to have as good of a start that he did to the season. And yes, he trailed off towards the end. I think that Geno was a little maybe overwhelmed himself
Mhm.
mentally. He's always been a very smart quarterback. I think people kind of took him for somebody who was just going to be a career backup, which we all expected. 10 years after he was drafted, he comes onto the scene with the Seahawks, and everyone's like, well, Drew Lock has all the talent in the world, but they forget Geno's a more
Yes.
talented quarterback than he is.
Yes.
Coming out of West Virginia, people were talking about Geno as being one of the best quarterbacks to come out for a long time. He might even be ascending to the point of being a top 5, top 7 quarterback in the NFL. And now he just was a nobody, essentially, a backup. And
Mhm.
then we see Shane Waldron help him get on his feet. He understands the offense. I think one of the big things that comes in for this whole Russell versus Geno Smith thing, we now have evidential proof
Mhm.
that when you allow Russell Wilson to determine some of the offensive play calls, some of the structure of the offense, you don't necessarily get the best result.
Right.
Now, the offensive line in Denver last year was atrocious. It was so awful. And they didn't have a consistent run game. The only guy they had there consistently was Melvin Gordon, and then he was fumbling the ball all of the time. So Russell had his own struggles that made everything worse on top of what he was asking the offense to do. Geno Smith came in, was just constructing the offense,
Right.
and then you see him make those next tier throws. That's, for me, what really sells this whole offense. The running back situation is going to be interesting to watch. You're probably getting a discount on Kenneth Walker,
Mhm.
who's a very special runner. I think because, again, Zach Charbonnet was drafted, people don't remember how good
Right.
of a runner Kenneth Walker is. And if you look at the running back room, sometimes you just need guys.
Yeah.
You just need guys out, floor raisers, and Zach Charbonnet is going to be able to come in, be a consistent pass catcher, a good pass protector, and a guy who you can trust in those situations behind Kenneth Walker. So everybody around, I think, is going to get an elevated sense. I'm very interested to see how the the flow of the offense goes. If it's going to be a little bit more up tempo, I think they're going to be more methodical, like they were last year. They weren't necessarily a top tier level type of run their offense extremely fast. Like you're not seeing that in Seattle. But
Right.
I do think that everything that Geno Smith does, threatening all three levels of the defense is the big point for me, because he's gotten like no tread on the tires. He
Mhm.
hasn't been throwing the football for years. He also was a sneaky like top 6 rushing quarterback. He had this, I think he had the 6th most rushes among quarterbacks last year. That's
Right.
not something people expected. I didn't expect Geno Smith to run that much. So that's something we all also should take into account, especially with Jackson Smith-Njigba on the field more often. Defenses are going to be worried about the passing attack. Geno might be able to take off more than he did last year, and everything in Seattle is really elevating itself offensively. The defense is getting better. Their offense is, I think, getting better. So I think focusing on offenses that are in their second year and they have more familiarity with everybody else. There's no
Yeah.
changes on the offensive
Yeah.
staff is a huge thing too.
Yeah.
That's always something to really look at, is when you don't have defections to other places. Like we might see a slight downturn in Philadelphia because Shane Steichen's not the offensive coordinator anymore, and
Right.
he kind of was given the keys to that offense after Nick Sirianni was the coach. So we'll see how that goes. But I always love consistency and guys that have that chemistry. And this offense just got better and they have that chemistry. So I'm very excited to see Geno Smith this year with everything that he did last year being able to kind of improve upon, because
Yeah.
I think he still can get better.
Yeah. A lot of people forget, and it's funny, the cycle, right? The
Yeah.
2013 draft was a terrible, terrible quarterback draft. That was the EJ
Yes.
Manuel draft.
Yes.
And Geno fell to the second round in that draft. I believe that was the draft. Maybe I'm a year off. But
I think you're
I
right.
remember writing him up. I loved him at
Mhm.
West Virginia because he had that crossbow just in the short and intermediate game. He
Yeah.
saw what he saw was valid. He would let the ball go and he would anticipate breaks. He would lead his receivers. He was really polished in terms of his play fakes and ball handling. He was tough. He was elusive in the pocket. He kept his eyes downfield on the move. I really liked him. And I think when we look back at his career, maybe New York wasn't the best place for him to land. Maybe.
Mhm.
And we could get into more third rail hot button type issues about, well, why was he overlooked for so long if he was actually a viable starter? But he's not overlooked any longer. And you mentioned the backfield, and I'll just close that Seattle conversation with this. There's no reason that Walker and Charbonnet can't hit.
Yes.
Both. Walker, you're getting fourth, fifth round now. He can absolutely hit as a third rounder. Just if he stays healthy and is the guy whose number gets called at the goal line, I mean, he can be Jamal Williams plus, right?
Yep.
Charbonnet, the better receiving back, probably get some drives to himself here and there. Probably even at 45% of the snaps, touches. What's he now? 10th round pick in redraft leagues?
I think so, yeah.
So
Around there.
there's no reason in a good backfield. What did we see Kamara and Ingram do? Right? In a good backfield, you can have
I mean, Zeke and Pollard a few years ago
Yeah.
too. Like, it's not like this is unheard of.
Right. So get in on that Seattle running game and quarterback. You mentioned Tony Pollard. Let's talk about Tony Pollard, because the theme today is trades to make. So we're in that dead zone. Well, there's a few OTAs left. We're still absorbing OTAs, but everyone go on vacation. I'm going out to California, North County, San Diego for a couple of weeks. Everyone go on. Even in the NFL, they go on vacation. Go on vacation. Unplug your brain. Take some time off football. But in your dynasty leagues, this is your chance to make a trade before the hive mind absorbs something that's coming. I mean, even Alexander Madison and Dalvin Cook, even though that was as foreseeable can be, Alexander Madison's ADP is going to start to go up. Dalvin Cook, we'll see what happens with him, but chances are it's going to be lower. And there are things we can see coming. So there are players like a Tony Pollard, Daniel, that in 2 or 3 months, his value is going to be different, right? He's either going to be like 3-4 weeks into the season, he's either going to be untouchable, or it will be clear that there was a sell high window, trying to find someone who's buying high. What side are you on in the Tony Pollard question?
For Dynasty, I'm more on the sell side, because right now you're talking about a running back who's 26 years old. He's on the franchise tag. That's the key here, because when you he doesn't have a ton of tread on the tires, but he's a very good space back. He's not the best between the tackles, but that doesn't necessarily matter a ton when you're in an offense, for example, like Dallas. This might be his last year there, and when you have these guys that are on franchise tags, you don't know the future for them, and you have Mike McCarthy, who's his own Joker. We don't really know what he's going to end up doing with the backfield. Tony Pollard's season this year could be extremely good. It could be a really, really excellent season, and I would love. I think in a redraft, I'm going to be pretty high on him, and you guys are going to find that out in a little while, because I'm working on something with Tony Pollard for the year. But I do think that in Dynasty, we have to look at selling him. There's a lot of talk about him being valued extremely high in consensus views for everything that he's done, especially if he does stay in Dallas. They haven't addressed the backfield there. They basically, it's just Tony Pollard and Malik Davis. Then you have Rico Dowdle, and they drafted Deuce Vaughn out of Kansas State. So you don't necessarily have a ton of guys vying for all the touches in Dallas right now. So in terms of down the road value, these high volume years that we expect from running backs who are a little bit older, might have some nicks and bruises and some injuries on them as well. You don't ever try and forecast for injuries, but you have to kind of factor that sometimes when you think that they're going to get this huge workload, that can add years, or take years off of a running back if they're not built for it. I think that we even saw that with Zeke. He was getting so many carries. He was a guy who maybe we didn't expect to just kind of fall off this cliff. But with the running back position, that cliff comes at any time past like 25, 26 years old. It can just kind of come, and we don't really know when it's going to happen. So with Tony Pollard, this is one of those years where I do think he's going to be an extremely good play right now in 2023. He's going to be a very good player. He's going to have a good season, and that's where you're looking for to get that value. And right now, you might be able to get him at his peak. There's some places that out there that think he's going to he could arguably finishes the running back one in fantasy this year. That's something that you can take advantage of right now before training camp starts, and maybe guys like Malik Davis, or before they sign somebody and kind of help and kind of nuke that value a little bit. So I loved what Tony Pollard brings for a fantasy skill set. He is a very good pass catcher. He's an underrated pass protector as well. Like he's quite good in that department for a guy who was behind Zeke, and people said, well, Zeke is only there to help in pass protection. Well, Tony Pollard's not bad at it. He's really not a liability out there. He was very active in pass protection throughout my charting from last year. So those are all things that you really want to look for this year. But in terms of projecting for the future, I'm not sure his value is going to be any higher than it is right now.
Yeah, well, maybe see, I'm like make it a little riskier. Maybe wait. Hopefully, he comes out of the gate hot. Looking at the Cowboys' schedule,
Yeah.
they start with
Yeah.
the Giants, the Jets, and then the Cardinals. I was going to mention the Cardinals, by the way. Another reason to love Geno Smith. Another reason to love Seattle's offense. 2 games against the Rams. 2 games
Oh,
against the
yeah.
Cardinals. Well, I mean, I didn't look at the schedule to see which one of them in Week 18. But the point is, you want some of that. I think you could those teams could be drafting 1 and 2 basically. And if
Absolutely.
they don't, it's because they play each other twice, the Cardinals and the Rams. And we'll see what Matthew Stafford does. But and you maybe that Cardinals game, right? Cowboys go down to Phoenix and Pollard has like 3 touchdowns, 200 total yards or something. But the sell high window is open. What you do, Daniel, is you make some offers where you ask for what you're going to ask for when he's the number 1 running back after 3 weeks. And they'll say, nah, if someone's at, and then they'll come back and you say, well, Tony Pollard's going to win a championship for me this year. And then you get that deal done. So, yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it, too, is we really like Tony Pollard for this year. How long will that last? Well, the Cowboys are kind of telling us they didn't sign him to a 4-year, $60 million deal. They signed him to like basically 1-year, $10 million deal. Let's talk about Indianapolis going and the second year offense articles out there for you or anybody else to take. I need to carve out some time to do it and do some research and look for. Let's focus on second year offenses, but a first year offense. You mentioned him already, Shane Steichen. He's going to have Anthony Richardson to work with. I got a few people thought it was someone said it was a galaxy brain take. That's fine. I don't mind the galaxy brain. The one I like the most is Mayor of Narrative Street. But I said, Jalen Hurts, he's a good quarterback, but he's that 8 color box of crayons. Anthony Richardson's like the 64 color box of crayons. As an offensive coordinator, play designer, play caller, the things that Anthony Richardson offers to put stress on a defense, arm strength, arm talent, speed, size, durability, you can do more. And then you look at what Indianapolis has in terms of weapons, right? Jelani Woods was in the news this week. He's going to be that field stretching tight end. Josh Downs, who they got. Matt Harmon loved him. Matt Harmon said, Mr. Wide Receiver, reception. I couldn't believe he was still there in the 3rd round. There's your speed slot. Alec Pierce can go win those balls on the boundary. But they already had their number 1 receiver in Michael Pittman. Now, Michael Pittman is another one, right? We can look at this offense. Now you're forecasting this offense. If it's a Justin Fields Bears 2022 offense and they're throwing the ball 15, 18 times a game, well, maybe the sell high window is now. But if this offense clicks the way that Philly's offense clicked, or if Anthony Richardson, we got to remember he's going to learn on the job. So what you see from Anthony Richardson in September might not be what you see come November, December. Michael Pittman, basically, it almost comes down to this for me, Daniel. Are you going to want to get Anthony Richardson's number 1 receiver now, or are you going to want to trade him away?
So I'm going in and buying him now, possibly waiting until the first 3 weeks of the season, maybe the first month, kind of see what they're doing, because that's when you see what an offense is going to become. And these rookie quarterbacks have to adjust to the speed of the NFL. You might be able to find somebody that's like got Michael Pittman, and Anthony Richardson might come out of the season, out of the off season and into the regular season a little rough. And that's going to happen, especially for these transition. That's something that we talk about every year. It doesn't happen with every rookie quarterback. Some of them come out very rarely, and they're just kind of like clicking on all cylinders. They typically take a little bit of time. Even the best quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes did not play his entire first season. There were flashes in camp that they were trying to keep hush hush, and then he had the Week 17 game against the Broncos, and he just kind of like drugged them to win that game after he came out and let Tyler Bray almost, throw it away. But we won't talk about that. But I love watching like Michael Pittman play. He's the unquestioned number 1 receiver in Indianapolis. He's the most talented, the biggest in terms of what he does well. He's not the best separation creator. That would be now Josh Downs. Josh Downs is a fantastic intermediate to short route runner. He's not going to be a deep down the field guy because you got 3 skyscrapers with Jelani Woods and Alec Pierce and Michael Pittman that you can just throw down the field and then just have Josh Downs there and be like, hey guys, there's nobody around me because everyone's down the field. I love that aspect of the offense. And when we compare these young, big armed running type quarterbacks in their offensive schemes and their coaching staffs, I like to look at defensive head coach, offensive head coach. The Bears have a defensive head coach, and obviously Matt Nagy was at just not, he was at his wit's end in Chicago when Justin Fields got there. Like they were just, we're done with Matt Nagy, and he was trying to do everything he could. People kind of forget that he made Mitch Trubisky good for a little while
bit
there.
Against wasn't there a game against Tampa Bay when they scored like 40 some points and he threw 5 touchdowns and it looked like, oh, they figured it out. It's just, hey, everything Andy Reid touches turns to gold.
I went to the playoffs a couple times, but I mean, that is what it is. He's now an offensive coordinator again where he should be. I don't necessarily think he's a head coach, but Shane Steichen in Indianapolis, the offense they ran is he's going to bring into Indy. And right now, like I said, you're looking for these windows to buy players. And Michael Pittman Jr. last year his average depth of target dipped, by the way. It was awful. It was something like 7.7 yards, which his previous, let's see if I can pull this up really quickly. I had it up and it just kind of disappeared on me. His average depth of target last year was 7.7. In 2021, it was 10.3.
Yeah.
That was Carson Wentz.
Right.
That was Carson Wentz, everybody.
Right.
Like if we're talking about Anthony Richardson, if he can be the 2021 version of Carson Wentz in his rookie season,
right,
that's a player in Michael Pittman Jr. that I want. I want everything of that. They weren't a high volume passing offense. If I remember correctly, he threw 27 touchdowns and 2 interceptions or through a certain point.
Something that made it look like he was really good, but he was actually Carson Wentz the whole time.
Yeah, the end of the season against the Jags, we all remembered, he's trying to throw like behind his back or something while he's being drugged down. Oh, that's Carson Wentz. Yeah, we understand now. So if that can be the season he has, something where he's not necessarily always taking a ton of risks and taking care of the football, and Michael Pittman still has over 1,000 yards and 6 touchdowns, but he did his second year. The ceiling for that duo and Anthony Richardson and Michael Pittman is way higher than it is with Carson Wentz. So right now on Football Guys, as a dynasty wide receiver, he is a dynasty wide receiver 20. And I'm totally okay with that. I would love to buy a 25-year-old player who's getting a better quarterback than he's ever played with in his entire career, is the unquestioned number 1 receiver, and has room to even grow as a player. So everything that they're doing right now with that offense, we're going to see what they want to do with, Alec Pierce, who is a good field stretcher. I have questions about his ability to be a true number 2 option.
Right.
I think that can still be taken over by a guy who's more open immediately, readily available to a young quarterback. I think Josh Downs has an opportunity to kind of do that for him, as well as some of the tight ends, which, a rookie quarterback's best friend is genuinely, routinely referred to as rookie quarterback's best friend. So these are things that I'm really looking at. And Michael Pittman Jr. right now is a player that I really want to get shares of, but especially maybe those first couple of weeks of the season where the offense maybe doesn't click right away, and then you can get him even cheaper than he is now.
Yeah, I think that what folks need to take away from this part of the conversation is, again, and it'll be interesting. Colts start with the Jags and Texans and Ravens, and then the Rams. But then you get the Rams and the Titans and the Jags again.
Yeah.
So there's your liftoff, right? And it is time to start looking at the schedule and start thinking about how you get teams off to a hot start and so on. But I think the 2 key takeaways here are: one is Anthony Richardson's going to learn on the job. He's the kind of quarterback that you don't put in the incubator and you make sure he has so many mental reps. When he comes out, he knows exactly what he's looking at. You don't want to hurt his confidence, and you want to make sure that he's building good habits and not bad habits. No. And you mentioned rookie quarterbacks. So we all remember Cam Newton. Cam Newton was just abysmal in the preseason. Everybody who hated the Cam Newton pick, everybody who was anti-Cam Newton, in the preseason,
exactly.
and then he just came out and the league didn't know what to do with him. And Anthony Richardson could be that kind of player. Maybe not quite as Newton wasn't flawless, but I think he was a lot more refined in his decision making and his ability to play at a mental speed that the NFL forces quarterbacks to play at. We may see something, especially with Shane Steichen in his ear. So there could be that ramp up where you could have a few weeks where, geez, they reached for him at number 4. He's not ready. Should they go to Gardner Minshew?
Yeah.
And then next thing you know, it takes off. The other thing is Shane Steichen's going to throw downfield more. It's just going to be a little more daring do in the pass offense. You all remember watching the Eagles last year. No risk it, no biscuit kind of stuff. So, yeah, that's exciting. So many exciting things, right? That's another fun thing about doing these dynasty trades or throwing some offers out there. And remember, folks, it never hurts to put offers out there because you're laying the groundwork for
No.
that trade later on. Okay. People might be generally, I think most people, inertia keeps them from making trades. But if you put the idea out there, and I always like putting trade offers because at least you get parameters, right? What would you be looking
Yeah.
for? Who are you interested in on my roster? So it's a good time to put that stuff out there, and it's a way you can tap into that anticipatory excitement. All right, there's some players I wanted to bring up, and again, the idea here, Daniel, is there are players, we can make a list of players that their value 3-4 months from now is going to be different.
Yeah.
Now, it could be lower, it could be higher, but the one bet that's not going to come through is everything's just going to stay flatline. To me, the first player that pops into my head when I describe that is Trey Lance. Trey Lance is a real interesting player right now because I think you have a group of people kind of like San Francisco, right? You invested a lot to get Trey Lance. You're not really getting anything out of him right now. Now, I don't know what happened behind the scenes, what kind of offers were out there for Lance, if there even were offers, whether San Francisco just set the asking price so high that team said thanks, but no thanks. And we have the Brock Purdy recovery variable here. But it sure seems to me like, hey, if Brock Purdy is still playing well, then come October, geez, you might be able to get Trey Lance for half of what you would have to pay for him. You might not even have to spend a first round pick to get him in your super flex leagues. Who knows? Alternatively, Trey Lance, he's going to have a chance to, I know it's Brock Purdy's job, et cetera, but Trey Lance offers things that Brock Purdy can't. And Trey Lance, there's a reason that they took him number 3. There's a reason they moved up. He adds dimensions that only Robert Griffin III really added to that Shanahan offense. And he was the number 1, by most measures, the number 1 fantasy quarterback in his rookie year. So are you willing to take that chance? Are you hitting up the Trey Lance team in your dynasty league saying, what would it take? What would just laying that groundwork? Or alternatively, to people that have Trey Lance, you saying, you know what, sell now because look at Jordan Love. Look at some of these players where the longer you hold them, the less they're worth.
Yeah, this is a tough one. This is when it comes to Trey Lance, I personally have been acquiring him. I've already done it multiple times in a couple of dynasty leagues that I have. I think when it comes for this decision for me is if he's not getting a chance in San Francisco, he's 23. He's getting a chance somewhere, I think. If it's not there, it's going to be somewhere else next year. And that's what I'm betting on. The physical tools that he has, whether or not he's been able to really grasp the NFL game isn't necessarily his entire fault. He's gotten a game here, 4 games his rookie season, like trying to get accustomed to it, learning different things. And now, Jimmy Garoppolo, Brock Purdy, Sam Darnold apparently looks fantastic in San Francisco. There's so much a deception being thrown out by San Francisco. You don't really know what's going on with him personally. But I think in terms of pure talent, dimensionally and physically, Trey Lance lifts the ceiling. I won't say the floor. He doesn't lift the floor. That's the floor is Brock
Right.
Purdy, what you saw last year. Like that's the floor of what the offense could be. Because I'm not trying to just completely put a ton of what Brock Purdy did out of mind, but he was much better than I think many people expected him to be, large part due to the offense, but there were some throws that he got away with. They call them turnover worthy plays. There were tons of them and they did not come down for interceptions or things like that. And I just tend to believe that the law of, net of variables will even that out. So we'll see what ends up going on with their quarterback situation. But in dynasty leagues, I am actively looking to get Trey Lance. You might be able to get him for a high second round pick
Yeah.
at this point.
Yeah.
Like, just why not try to just
No.
float the idea? Like, just be like, hey, I got 2 seconds. I got one of these in
Yeah.
the top three in the second round. Why not? You're not using Trey Lance, and the San Francisco 49ers
Right.
might not be using Trey Lance either. So I just think that the idea of a 23-year-old quarterback that hasn't necessarily had a ton, hasn't been given the benefit of the doubt by almost anybody since he's joined the league, and now he's being thrown into a quarterback room with Sam Darnold, who we know has not been able to win in the NFL. He just hasn't been able to.
Hmm.
And Brock Purdy, who again was a seventh round pick, but actually not just a seventh round pick, he was Mr. Irrelevant
Right.
and was able to elevate, his play a little bit last year, caught a little bit of fire in a bottle and was able, lightning in a bottle, as they say, and was able to take them to the NFC Championship game. I think that Trey Lance is being left for dead by a lot of people, maybe even including the 49ers. And I think somewhere else he's going to get a shot. And I'm willing to bet on that.
Yeah, I would be too. Um, One of the things that pops in my head immediately is Dane Brugler, who's peerless, really, as far as just
Mhm.
comprehensive draft knowledge breakdowns. I asked him a couple months ago on the show if his evaluation, if his view of Lance has changed based on what's gone on for. He said no, and I had him as worthy
Yeah.
of the pick that he went at. We haven't seen Lance play affirmatively badly, but I think that he's being valued as if we've seen him play in a sample, a 3, 4, 5 game sample, and looking like, ooh, you know. Uh, and as far as fantasy goes, I mean, you've seen Justin Fields wasn't a good passer at all last year, and he was still a very impactful fantasy
Yeah.
player. So Trey Lance is going to get a shot eventually. Maybe even we'll see about Jordan Love. I have a feeling Green Bay is going to make it so that he's not really that exciting of a quarterback to watch. Go ahead.
What happens if Trey Lance ends up in Green Bay
Sure.
next year?
Sure. Why not?
I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I'm just
Or
saying. Like,
Atlanta.
if somewhere one of these two spots
Yeah.
where you have weapons,
Yeah.
like I I know the percentages of those are low. I'm willing to take that bet right now. I
Yeah.
really am.
Yeah, and it's always fantasy football is making decisions with incomplete information. I mean, that's just what we
Mhm.
do. So if you're saying, "Well, I don't know, there's too much uncertainty," but that uncertainty is what creates the buy window for Trey Lance. So I'm glad
Yeah.
we agree with that. Let's just talk rookies. I'll just throw out a
Yeah.
broad rookie question because we all have seen it. Look, and there are already some rookies who are generating buzz, right? Or there are rookies, whether it's usage, like, whoa, the Tyjae Spears, they're using him as all over the place,
Mhm.
or Jahmyr Gibbs, all over the formation, or Zach Charbonnet fitting in really well. That's just some running back notes right off the bat. There's other rookies, maybe not generating a lot of buzz, but we know, Daniel, that when training camp starts, once we're a couple days, week,
Yeah.
there's going to be players. It's too late. It's too late. The cat's out of the bag. Who's a rookie that you think I may even overpay for them? I may offer objectively more than what they are worth right now, because if you missed out in a rookie draft, it could be a player that went high that you're willing to overpay because even that price will look cheap, or it could be a sleeper. It could be, hey, everybody's excited about Alexander Madison and Dwayne McBride is going to force a
Mhm.
committee right off the bat, or something like that. David Montgomery's not going to be healthy. Have you heard of Mo Ibrahim? Seen what he did at Minnesota? Who's a rookie that you want to take advantage of the lull in the schedule, the fantasy football calendar? Because when training camps open, people are going to be talking about him.
Oh, I love this question. It's so good. There's so many young rookies to talk about, but Kendre Miller is my number one guy to go after because there's still, it feels like Alvin Kamara is going to end up playing at some point this year. And again, this is Dynasty. This is not this year.
Right.
Jamal Williams last year, yeah, he scored 17 touchdowns. That's fine. In next year, do I think he's going to be relevant in New Orleans? Do I know that Alvin Kamara is going to be there? Absolutely not. But we are going to find out in a few days, or when training camp starts, how good Kendra Miller is. And I'm telling you right now, he can do it all. I know that he wasn't asked to pass protect. He wasn't asked to pass catch a lot at TCU. The opportunities that he got, he showed the effort, he showed the technique, and he was actually a very good pass catcher with his hands down the field and as a safety option, a check down option. I'm a huge fan of Kendra Miller, what he could be. I think next year he could be the unquestioned RB1 in New Orleans in an offense that, yeah, it's going to have Derek Carr and some weapons around him. But at the end of the day, they're still going to want to run the ball. They have Dennis Allen as their head coach. I don't think he's leaving unless they have an
No.
absolutely awful season and everything just kind of turns on their head, I do believe that they're going to want to run the football. This is going to be a very, we're going to run the ball kind of
Yeah.
thing. He's going to get some pass opportunities, and I think that their offensive line, while last year held a lot of so many injuries, it was awful to see. I think they'll be healthy this year. Going forward, we'll kind of find out how their investments in Trevor Penning will play out. I think he played decently well last year in his opportunities that he gotten after he came back from his injury.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that he's got some room to grow, and that's why he was drafted as high as he was coming out of a Division II school. It's harder to or an FCX school, excuse me, to be able to get that jump and always know that they're just going to be able to come in and be what they were at college. So I'm excited about Kendre Miller, what he's going to offer, not just this year, because I think that he could snag a good amount of work, especially if Alvin Kamara faces a suspension at any point this year. We don't know if that's coming, when it's going to happen, if it does. And we know that Jamal Williams is not a guy who can handle a total workload. He's just not a very good pass catcher, and he's just not explosive. They use him in the goal line in some short area situations for a reason. So Kendra is a very dynamic player, and I think there's a reason he's in New Orleans, because they don't know much about Alvin Kamara either. So before training camp hits out and he's blowing it up, I think this would be a great time to go get him. And again, I would overpay for him.
Yeah, I think that you bring up a really good point too, if you're looking at rookies, because look, honestly, you should be buying second-year players right now.
Absolutely.
Those are the post-hype players that you want. Rookies still have that glow, especially if somebody just spent a rookie pick in the Dynasty League. They're probably not going to be willing to trade them, but that's why maybe you come in and overpay with the urgency. But I think that what I like about this take is you're saying, hey, when you're looking at rookies to target or lay that groundwork for, because maybe someone who takes Kendre Miller and, like you said, Alvin Kamara, maybe he doesn't get suspended this year. Maybe they kick it down the road another year. Jamal Williams at least is going to be that guy between the tackles this year. So come week 1, week 2, you make an offer of next year's second and next year's fourth for Kendre Miller, and they say, no, I want to see him play. And then 3 weeks into the season, well, they haven't even really got to see him play. They're like, maybe I'll just take those picks and kick that down the road.
Yeah.
And you're always laying that groundwork. But what you're saying is, don't look at the depth chart today. Look at the depth chart next year or a year after. And that's why I like another player that comes to mind in that same vein for me, Daniel, is Tyler Scott. I think, and would anybody have been shocked if instead of Rice, Scott went to the Chiefs in the second round? I mean, he could have been a second round pick. I mean, if you look at the way these wide receivers were packed, the wide receivers that went off like late second to fourth round, I mean, there wasn't, evaluation wise, the spread wasn't that big. Tyler Scott is another dynamic player. Chase Claypool, Darnell Mooney, are they going to be with the Bears next year? Maybe not. I know that DJ Moore probably will be, but I think that again, and teams, the good teams, are absolutely drafting with next year's depth chart, the depth chart 3 years from now in mind. Need-based drafting. Not that many teams, or good teams, good organizations are doing that. Well, you said there are a lot of rookies. So give any other names, you would feel remiss. You just want to mention, you want to put out there, because it's June 14th while we're recording this. So you can say, hey, folks, I told you on June 14th to pay attention to this guy. Anybody else you want to toss out there?
Marvin Mims in Denver. Again, you're looking ahead to whether they trade Judy or Sutton. I don't think Patrick necessarily is going to be there next year. Like, there's their entire wide receiver room outside of Marvin Mims could be in flux from this year to next offseason. So you're going to look at a guy who's going to be an extreme downfield threat. We saw them try to work KJ Hamler into that role. Obviously, he couldn't stay healthy. He wasn't as successful in that on the field as they wanted him to be. And Jerry Jeudy, while he's a fast, good route runner in the short to intermediate parts, he does not threaten down the field and doesn't win down the field. It's just a different realm for him. I have had multiple conversations this offseason about him versus Christian Watson, why he's winning downfield versus Jerry Jeudy. Well, one guy runs a 4.3 and he's very, very big and fast, and corners and safeties didn't really understand how fast he was, and he was running by him downfield. And Jerry's like, well, I can get manhandled a little bit more on the deeper routes, but short to intermediate, he's very good. I do think that Jeudy is going to probably be there. and it would be a very good. Personally, I think he's the best overall talent-wise receiver in Denver. But when we look at next season, trying to figure out, well, if there is one of these guys left and two of them are gone,
Mm-hmm.
Marvin Mims walks in as the number 2 receiver.
Yeah.
And that's as a deep threat, a deep slot as Zeke, a guy who can play all over the place. You really can't press him if he plays on the outside because he has that deep field speed as well. It's really hard to project what he's going to be involved in, but I do know that I want parts of Sean Payton's offense, even if it's going to be Russell Wilson as the quarterback, when he has those, it's like he's like a quarterback in a bowling alley.
Mm-hmm.
If you're throwing the ball down the lane without any bumpers and you're really, really new to this whole thing, they're probably going to go in the gutter. But if you have those bumpers up, the ball can't go into the gutter.
Yeah.
I think that's what Sean Payton brings to this offense. He's going to put those gutters up for Russell Wilson, and that will help the offense be better. So this year down the road, we know he's going to be there because they overpaid him a ton when they signed him or when they traded for him. I think Marvin Mims is a guy that I really want to look at for, again, down the road. Mm-hmm. Maybe even he emerges halfway through the season year. If you go get him now or for the first couple of weeks of the season when it's Tim Patrick, Cortland Sutton, and Jerry Jeudy, we're talking about, again, a guy you're going to end up being able to play now, see what he does on your team as a rookie, and then stepping into a bigger role in his second year.
Put up the bumpers isn't exactly a rallying cry like let Russ cook, but yeah.
No.
No, you're right, though. I mean, I think that's a good way to describe it. I think that it is Sean Payton as a coach king. Let's keep that in mind. You mentioned the unforced error that George Payton made. George Payton didn't need to extend Russell Wilson. I don't think Russell Wilson was demanding more years on his contract. I think George Payton, and Cecil has laid this stuff out, it's a Bronco show, that George Payton is kind of serving at the convenience of Sean Payton at this point. So you're looking at Marvin Mims as the only receiver that we know Sean Payton wanted on this roster.
Correct.
So, and they did give Jeudy that 5th-year option. I don't know. I mean, I wonder if that has more to do with the wide receiver pay scale. We'll see. Jerry Jeudy has a massively wide range of outcomes for this year.
Absolutely.
He could be anywhere from catching 100 balls to benched, and we'll see.
We'll see. I mean, I don't disagree.
Yeah. Let's stay in the division. Anybody that you're trying to get on the cheap as the guy that Patrick Mahomes is going to riff with? It didn't happen for anybody last year. Is there somebody that you think this is the year, at least the year, to take advantage of the risk reward, the cost basis? Because Mahomes, it doesn't really matter who's around him. He continues to play well.
Yeah, Patrick's going to always be a relevant quarterback. Like I said, it doesn't matter. They won a Super Bowl last year with a ton of injured players, Now we see Juju Smith-Schuster is still dealing with that nagging knee injury that he had playing in the Super Bowl. So it's kind of, it's funny. We always see, people talk about, Patrick was elevated because, he had Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill. Yes, he still has Travis Kelce, but it's important to have elite players in the NFL. Like, you're not always going to be devoid of talent as an elite quarterback. You're just not. Even Tom Brady at the end of his career in New England still had some elite players that were good for him in that system, specifically one, Julian Edelman. And after that, we saw the decline of the entire offense after he retired. So the one guy, everybody was high on him last year, and I tried so hard to just, everyone needed to calm down. Sky Moore. Love the player. I love the player, but you had to calm down. They brought in Juju Smith-Schuster, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, and Justin Watson, who was a starter for them throughout a big portion of the middle of the season. Veteran guys for a reason to draft a young player, and then they trade for another young player in Kadarius Toney to bring them along. That's what that was. These veteran players playing with Travis Kelce was not just for Patrick Mahomes' benefit to have guys that he could trust to be in the right spot. It was to help learn, to teach, and bring along guys like Sky Moore and then eventually Kadarius Toney to learn that and earn the trust from the quarterback as well. Before last year in the Tyreek Hill era, the wide receivers outside of Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill, they didn't have a ton of trust from Patrick Mahomes. And you kind of saw that elevate through it as someone who covers the Chiefs. So I saw it a little bit more detailed than a lot of people did.
Yeah.
And you see him by, the Byron Pringles, the Demarcus Robinsons, who again blew up a couple times for the Ravens last year. That's a weird one-off situation. I'm just so confounded by Demarcus Robinson. You see him have some
Right.
crazy weeks for the Chiefs, now for the Ravens. Like, I'm not entirely sure how that goes, but Sky Moore needed a lot of growth because coming out of Western Michigan with such a small route tree, you're not asked to do everything. And they came out this offseason, have talked specifically about how they threw the book at him, essentially. They were like, you're going to play outside. You're going to play the slot. You're going to play reduced split. You're going to play in the backfield. You're going to play as a Z. They're going to do everything. And they admitted they don't do that with a lot of their receivers.
Right.
Which, one, it tells you they want him to be kind of like this safety valve, this first down merchant, this PPR machine, if you will, in an offense whose PPR machine and also biggest play threat is Travis Kelce. Last year, Juju Smith-Schuster was that other guy who was the chain mover, especially on those third downs. I just did a video for my other channel, rgrfootball.com, looking at their third downs. And it was Travis Kelce and then Juju Smith-Schuster and everybody else on third downs, guys that he trusted. Sky Moore is going to be that guy this year, in my opinion, because he's, again, a very good short to intermediate route runner. He gets it all now. Like the playbook's underneath him. They believe that he's taking that step as well. They are talking him up. Patrick's talking him up. Like, this isn't just, in my opinion, a ton of them trying to make everyone feel good about a player. I also broke down Sky Moore's year in review on the same YouTube channel. He's good. He's a very good player. He was open a ton, and he didn't get a ton of opportunities, but when he did, he didn't make a mistake. He did not make a ton of mistakes on the offensive side. He had a couple on special teams, but we don't necessarily care about special teams.
Right.
Here. So Sky Moore is a guy that I, again, really want parts of. He's cheap, as all the receivers are in Kansas City. MVS is another guy. What I think, especially in terms of redraft and best ball things like that, MVS is a guy that I'm targeting a lot because he's so cheap. It is just so easy to go after him. But yeah, Sky Moore, especially for dynasty purposes, I think he's going to be an extremely valuable player going forward. Maybe he's not going to be the 1,000-yard receiver this year. I do think he has that in his his realm of possibilities in the next few years, though.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that he's a Whippeal guy, Western Pennsylvania, Interscholastic Athletic League. We always represent Western Pennsylvania here. And if it's my couch, we're going to be talking Western Pennsylvania players. We're going to talk them up. And I think there's a theme, Daniel. We didn't, it wasn't premeditated. Second year, right? Second year offenses, second year players, post hype, and think that absolutely Sky Moore qualifies. Really quick before we go off the rails here for the last 10 minutes, really quick. Buy or sell Dalvin Cook?
I'm selling him.
Yeah.
I'm still selling him.
Even if you're win now, even if your team looks like a contender.
Yeah. I personally still am. I don't know what you're getting out of him. I have no idea.
Like you said, 20
didn't look good last year.
Well, and like you said, that running back cliff now is at least, and look, physiologically, have running backs changed? Has the game gotten that much rougher since the cliff was more like 30? No. But if the teams perceive that cliff is 26, 27, 28, then that's the cliff as far as we're concerned. DeAndre Hopkins, buy or sell?
I'm absolutely selling him. I don't think we're going to see the production that we even saw last year going forward for DeAndre Hopkins again.
Nobody cares about your team, but I'm doing Red Eye Masters right now with John Norton runs those. The John Norton leagues are fantastic. John Norton's a legend. And I had a choice because I had to free up my franchise tag for Patrick Mahomes. And I had a choice. It's a caps contract league. And I had a choice between cutting DeAndre Hopkins or Mike Evans. And I thought, well, I'm cutting Hopkins because of the uncertainty and because I think Hopkins and Cook are both in the phase of this is where you're valued now. You're going to go knocking on a bunch of doors. This is where you're valued. Now, if he signs with New England, it might have happened while we were talking. It sounds like it really sounds like they're getting everyone ready for the idea that he's going to sign in New England, which makes sense. They need him. Like you said, Juju, maybe that extra piece of information that here we are and Juju. So if we want to know why a young wide receiver, what was Juju when he hit free agency? 23, something like that, 24. Why
24, yeah,
why did he not
25.
get that much interest, even though he was so productive during his rookie contract? Well, some of that was Antonio Brown and what it created, Ben Roethlisberger extending plays, but obviously there was an issue. The way his contract was structured by the Chiefs last year was a real telltale sign too, because there was so many likely to be earned incentives. It wasn't like incentives that if you have an all-pro year, if we win the Super Bowl, it was incentives like if you just
Mhm.
do what you normally do, then we'll turn this into an $8-9 million contract, something like that. And I think that, but even Hopkins with the Patriots, it's not that. Jacoby Myers from last year, that's what you're going to get. So
Yeah, right.
I agree with you on both of those. If Cook ends up in Miami, I still love Devin A-Chain. I still think that he's going to, I think,
There's 4 backs there too.
yeah,
We can't forget, like, it's all speed merchants.
yeah,
That's what they want,
yeah,
and I still think that they want to use Mostert and Wilson a
yes.
little bit. It's going to be an extremely crowded
Right,
backfield,
right. A Chain's
extremely.
the one who can take any touch to the house. I have an extended take on that. I'll have to have you. We'll talk about that another time. It has to do with field spacing, but
Okay,
look. I'll take real quick. I shouldn't do this, and people are going to get sick of me saying this, but I think I mentioned this on the show once already. But I just want to mention it with you because I want to. You're so knowledgeable. I want to. You've got the Matt Waldman stamp of approval. What we saw from the Miami passing game last year was a complete outlier in terms of the number of
mhm,
chunk plays they created. And if you watch those plays, wow, was there a lot of space open in the middle of that defense facing Miami. So something about the
yes.
way Mike McCarthy designs his plays, how difficult it is to defend Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle, created a lot of space in the defense. Devin A-Chain, baby. I mean, get him out in that space. And we might be looking at a player that doesn't remember Antone Smith. I mean, what did he have? How many long touchdowns in that short stretch? I just think that that Miami's offense is distorting defenses in a way that we haven't seen before. And I think they see that A-Chain's a player who can take advantage of that. All right, let's turn the page. I'll ask you this because you got the Chiefs helmet. I think that's a Chiefs helmet.
Yeah.
You got your Go Blue hat. You got your Chiefs football. Another Chiefs helmet. But if it wasn't football, Daniel, what would be behind you? What's another passion? What's something else that you can just jump into the ocean and swim around forever?
Chess.
Ooh.
I have loved chess since high school. Actually, my uncle taught me when I was about 11 or
Uh
12,
huh.
and I took off for a little while. I played football, and then I come back. I joined high school.
Huh.
I was after. It's funny enough. After a football practice, I went into what was called their library, the things like that, and they were having practice. And I was watching. I was playing. Like, I forgot how much I enjoyed the game. And honestly, that's when it really took off for me. I love chess. I still pick it up every now and then.
Mm-hmm.
It's harder to get to, as this has now become my career, my what I do outside of being a stay at home dad. And yeah, chess is it's a fantastic, not just a game but intellectual
Mm-hmm.
tool that you can. Yeah, I still use everything that I've learned from my. I was in the chess team and then high school,
Mm-hmm.
like going to competitions, going to nationals, going to states, things like that. It was an incredible atmosphere, great team event, but also individual event. Like, it's one of the cooler things that I think I've done in my life, to be able to play in those big tournaments, place in those big tournaments, and really watch the different levels of
Sure.
competition. There's just so many different
Oh,
levels, and you think that you're playing chess. You're like, I'm pretty good at this, and then you realize that there's like 5 other levels to go above you, and you're just like, I'm not even close. So
right.
yeah, I think I actually do have a chessboard in my wife bought me one
Nice.
for Christmas a few years ago. Like, it's got the symbol of my family crest on it. Like,
Ah,
it's a very nice board. I got to put it in here somewhere. But yeah, chess is one of the things that I've loved for a very long time. It'll always be very special to me.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I think that I was the best chess player I will ever be in my life when I was about 10 or 11 years old. I remember I went to this summer camp where California University, Pennsylvania, Harvard on the Mon. Uh, there was I think they sent a player to the Brontez Miles. I think they got someone to the pros recently. Anyway, um, it was a summer camp where you went and you actually stayed in the dorms and took college classes in the college classrooms and stuff like that. As someone going between fifth and sixth grade, I geeked out on that, and I won the chess tournament, and it was with a lot of.
Mhm.
There's my Pittsburgh E's coming out with the tournament, and I won, and I think I was just a much more intuitive player as a youngster. And then by the time I was in college, there was kids, like there was a high school kid I remember playing in the coffee shop that I would hang out in, and he was like 15 or 16, and he just mopped the floor with me. I was, and was so I think you were kind of starting to allude that you were saying, and also like you said, the other layers of chess proficiency, like the people that do speed
Yeah.
chess, to play like 4 games at once. There's someone down here in New Orleans, if you come to the French Quarter down on Decatur, or maybe it's on North Peters down there by the Cafe du Monde, who has his big sign out that he's a chess grandmaster and you can sit down and play with him. Anyway, chess and football, it's easy to see the connections. Movable chess piece is a silly term. Every chess piece is movable, but it's still that point, right? You can even see the connections there. But I think you were starting to allude the idea that you've learned things from chess that you apply elsewhere in life. Is that fair?
Absolutely, it's one of, like I said, one of the greatest tools that I learned was thinking ahead and trying to
Ooh,
learn different things. And it's like when I'm watching football, and it's one of the so when I mean thinking ahead, you're always trying to stay ahead of your opponent when you're playing. So you make a move and you think about this move, how it will impact the game 5, 6,
right,
10 moves down the line, especially if you can force that player to do something. That translates specifically to football, especially in an Andy Reid offense, which
right,
is what I've learned a lot of my football knowledge from. Like, you will see them run this same exact formation, this 3-by-1 formation with Travis Kelce as the one on the left hand side with 3 receivers on the right hand side. They'll run like a same route combination with a deep middle down the field, which is usually a speed guy, MVS or McCole Hardman last year. And then what that does is it takes out the middle of the defense completely. So you run 2 slants on the opposite side with the receivers right into that middle of the field. Okay. They run the exact same
right,
formation, maybe a quarter, 2 quarters later, and they do the exact same draw out the middle of the field. And you see the defense bring one of the safeties down into the middle. Okay. And what that does is it allows them to now attack the opposite side. So you still have the same slants on the right hand side, but then you have a double move off of that. And so you have this slant corner from one of the receivers, and it's wide open on the right hand side for a big play. Like, that's what it's helped me learn, how these offensive coordinators, these coaches,
mm-hmm.
these how they're thinking about the game, and how you can see this play, this formation early in the game, and then you see it again later and you're like, okay, they're going to do almost the same thing, but they're going to have something different to it. So yeah, chess has been a great teach in just in one area aspect where you're always thinking ahead. And I think that especially now in today's NFL, with the changing of the guard, with the offenses we're seeing now, defenses are starting to think a little bit more ahead. We're seeing more cover 2 shells than I think we've seen in the last maybe 5, 6, 7 years in this point in time in the NFL. So always thinking ahead and trying to plan ahead against the defense and vice versa. It's a great tool.
Yeah, and it's information, right? Reminds me that
Mm-hmm.
whenever Texas Hold'em was really had a grip on everyone's mind, is that sometimes
Yeah.
sometimes it's just like sometimes you run plays to get information on how players are going to
Yeah.
react to that formation and personnel set. So when you need it on 3rd and 7 with the game on the line, then you're going to manipulate them into something because you
Mm-hmm.
understand when they get this visual information and diagnose this is how they're going to react. And then, well, checkmate, haha. You can checkmate a team. And I think that it's baseball season. I'm going to mention baseball. I think the way that
Yeah.
pitchers sequence their pitches, especially when you're a
Absolutely.
starter and you have to face a guy 3 times in a game, or if
Mm-hmm.
you're in the division, you have to face him multiple times over a year, maybe even in the playoffs. There's a lot of that. There's a lot of understanding how your opponent thinks. And an unsuccessful play can still be very productive in the big scheme of things, which is kind of like life,
Absolutely.
failing or trying something and finding out where your limits are, and so on and so forth. What you're doing, if you're planning a few moves ahead, is football guys. And it's, you mentioned being a stay-at-home dad. I'm a
Mm-hmm.
dad. Father's Day's coming up. We love dads, a lot of dads in the fantasy football world. There's a limited time 10% discount for football guys subscription. You can see Daniel's work and a lot of other people. Go to footballguys.com/audibledads, and it's only going to run through Father's Day. So if you want to get a gift for the fantasy football obsessed dad in your life, for the dad who's too busy to set his lineup, or just give one to yourself, because we dads always need to treat ourselves. It's certainly always a treat to get to talk to all of the wonderful people we have coming through on the couch and at Football Guys, including Daniel Harms in Harm's Way 19. And it's good. It's a lull in the calendar, but that means you're planning your chess moves in your fantasy league.
Yeah.
We're doing that for you folks because you are so classy.